ставши на коліно, своє полкове знамено, дивлюсь на нього я востаннє, у нез'ясованій журбі, всю кров мою, всі скитання, воно вібрало у собі. Всю кров
Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались з кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страни.
Найкращий пастух баранячий хотар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Їх доводи всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні. У нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів. Робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там пивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить. Хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар? Байрактар, Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ. Тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар.
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 Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
О, бля! Игорь!
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 392 of the stream. It's good to see you all again in the chat.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of the news of the war in Ukraine on the last day of this week of the war. And we've been getting some incredible news from inside of Russia in multiple different places around the border near Ukraine. The Russians are out of tanks. Practically all the tanks, except for the last ones at the bottom of the barrel. Now, I'm going to show you all the videos, and then we'll go into explaining what this means. So going to our first one, we saw T-54s on their way into Ukraine. Here's the video. You see the tanks passing by at the railway station? And just look at them. It's very nice to see.
From a museum.
We'll get to that in a second. Good question, though. But quite a decent amount, at least enough to supply an entire battalion tactical group with T-54s. Moving on into our next video, we also saw a similar clip coming from a different location showing T-54s on the way in another area near the border. This is a picture of a railroad car that someone was passing by, and it says that it's a T-54B modernized from a T-54 M1951, meaning it's the model from 1951. And then the next thing we got from inside of Russia was more T-54s going to Ukraine in this clip. I don't know how we got the aerial view on this one, but these are very interesting. I'll try and explain in a second why they're incredibly interesting, but these are just something else, I have to say. It's absolutely incredible. We can also see some Russian soldiers being carried like cattle inside of the goods car. Very nice to see. You can see them on the train. We can see a large amount of them as well as they move on into the area. We can see some of them were lucky enough to get explosive reactive armor put onto the front of their turrets, but beyond that, not really a lot. And here's the big deal, the real big deal. Some people are saying, and I've seen the comments here, that these are mobile artillery pieces. These in their function are not mobile artillery pieces, because if this is an SPG, then a T-90 is an SPG. This was Russia's medium tank. Y'all heard that right, it's not a main battle tank. When this thing was made, it was called a medium tank. And this is the most shocking thing about the T-54. The T-54 was introduced into service in the Soviet Union in 1948. Just 3 years after the Second World War, these were entering service. It kind of gives you an idea that these are, suffice it to say, obsolete. There's really no way you can even upgrade these things to be considered modern. I mean, like, hell, what are you going to... If you had to upgrade these things and refit them to become modern, you practically have to build a brand new tank. There's nothing in them that's new. There's no way you can even make them new. These things are just ancient. Ancient beyond belief. And what's even more interesting about some of the ones that we saw in this last clip here, and I may be seeing this wrong, maybe it's the shadows or something similar, but some of these look like they have an even earlier production turret. And these may actually have been the ones that were around in 1948. So let me pull these up. The T-54 M, let's see, it's like 1948, and let me type that in. Let's see, here we go. Here's a good picture of them. These are pretty much the first T-54s that ever went to service right here. They're something like a T-54 M 1948 or something similar. It looks like it's actually on the Wikipedia page. So we can see the original T-54-1 right here. And looking at the shadows and looking at how the turrets look, and we can't really see them that well in this video, so take it with a grain of salt. They look like they may be some of those first production versions of the T-54 that were ever used in the Soviet military. These things are so old that in most countries they're considered museum pieces, and the United States has actually fought these things before, and even then they were considered antique. let me bring y'all all to the Battle of 73 Easting. I got that incorrect last night, but tonight I'm getting that number right, dagnabbit. The Battle of 73 Easting was the last major tank battle to ever occur in history at this moment. The last major one in terms of the numbers involved. Right here you can see a destroyed Iraqi Type 69 tank burning out after it was destroyed by the 1st Armored Division of the United Kingdom. And what's very interesting about this is that while it's called a Type 69, the Type 69 is a license-built variant of the T-54 from the Soviet Union made in China. What you're looking at right here is a T-55 or T-54, much like the Russians will be using right now, that was destroyed all the way back in 1991 during the Gulf War. That's how old these things are, is that even then, the United States was saying Iraqi armor is obsolete and dated. The Russians 30 years later are using what we called in the 1990s outdated and obsolete armor. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. From what we understand, they are running out of really anything. And we don't really know what their actual role will be, because a lot of people are saying that they'll be artillery. But that really doesn't make a lot of sense, because they're not built to be an artillery piece. These are built to be tanks supporting the infantry. So it doesn't really make a lot of sense. Of course, tanks have been used in indirect fire missions throughout the course of this war by both Ukraine and Russia, but we've never seen anyone use these tanks solely as an SPG. By the way, Matthew, I can hear you typing over there. These things are tanks. That's their job. That is their role. We know that they will eventually be used like a tank. And these things are so old that they can't even face up to somewhat more modern Soviet-era armor like the T-64BV that is being used by Ukraine right now. So this is just sad. It's pitiful, and it's great. It's great to know that the Russians are sending these in, because it lets us know that their armor supplies are running dangerously low on everything else. For example, I'll show y'all this real quick. The T-62M, which many of y'all know is being used in Ukraine right now, and there are pictures of them being captured by the Ukrainian forces, like, for example, this one here, that was modernized with an IR sight on the turret. These things are quite old as well. They're about 60 years old at this point, just a little bit younger than the T-54 by about 10 years. But now we're seeing that they're using these in Ukraine, and they've been using them ever since May of last year, and now apparently they're even not able to keep up with their losses by replacing modern Russian tanks with T-62M. So now they're having to bring in T-54s to replace all of the armor losses they have, which tells us that in terms of the numbers of usable tanks they have, they're just about out of tanks. There's only probably a few hundred more losses that the Russian army can endure before their armor is completely gone, and the only things they have left that are usable are the tanks that would be sitting on the field. There will be no more tanks pulled out of storage because there won't be any left, which is it's just unbelievable. It blows me away to think Russia had the whole world fooled for decades after the Soviet Union collapsed, and even during the Cold War, that they were a modern, impressive fighting force, and just over a year and a month of fighting against Ukraine, which isn't even what their military was built to fight. Their military is built to go toe-to-toe with the entire Western world, and just a year and a month of fighting a single country that isn't even, at the beginning of the war, it wasn't even comparable technologically to the West, has completely flattened the Russian army to the point they're using stuff that's 70 years old. It's sad. The Russians just need to quit at this point, because you're going to have to start pulling out tanks that are 70 plus years old to use on the front lines. You're done already. It's sad. So there is the big news for today. It's not the only big news that happened, though. There is a lot of big news that happened today, but this is probably one of the most shocking things ever, because we were actually joking, Matthew. Remember, like 2 weeks ago with the live chat, oh yeah, they're going to be pulling out T-54s and T-34s next, aren't they? And now they're already starting to pull out the T-54s, and it'll probably only be a matter of a few more months before we actually see T-34s being used.
I'm surprised they even keep tanks that old in their inventory.
Well, that's a weird thing about the Soviet Union, is that the Soviet Union kept everything even when it was obsolete beyond belief, because, you know, for some reason the government didn't want to scrap them or anything, so they just kept them. So now the Russians just have thousands of old things just lying around, and that's why whenever you see that they're running out of AKs, guys just get Mosins by the thousands because they have millions of Mosins just sitting around. But with that,
What's the oldest tanks that we keep in our inventory? Is it like the 2000s or earlier?
Yikes, I think it would be like the 1980s, 1990s, and that's even a stretch as well, because those would be like M1 IPs, and I don't even know if anyone uses an M1 IP anymore. Let me see if I can find
And we only use those as like a last resort, I'm assuming. We don't send those out like on the battlefield for real, do we?
Nah, hell, these things are in an army depot somewhere just sitting around gathering dust. We don't even use these things in units right now, but it's probably the oldest thing we have in storage. If you went up against the U.S. military tomorrow, you would be seeing only M1A2s. The Marine Corps used to operate M1A1s, but they've retired their entire tank fleet with no replacements in the future, so they're just going to be tankless here forward. But you would go up against M1A2s exclusively. That would be it. We don't have anything older that is used in any units in the U.S. military than an M1A2.
Interesting.
And I see some people saying that we still use M60, so let me check that out. M60, MBT. And let's go to Wikipedia, because I was thinking for a second maybe we did, but let's see, it's in service till the present day, but I don't think the U.S. military still uses the M60. I believe it's like Turkey and a couple of other countries that do. So let me check. Let's go down to the operators list and figure out who runs them still. And there was a million variations of the M60, and then every country that got one then made a million variations of it as well. And we can actually see a Turkish M60 right here. It's almost so upgraded you can hardly tell that the turret is the normal M60 turret below it, due to the amount of armor that's been added on. But let's see. The map of M60 operators as of 2021 in blue with former operators in red. So it appears that we still use the M60s, but is probably as a recovery vehicle. So as of 2015, QM60s are in limited use as target vehicles for weapons and radar testing. The M60 series was retired from combat use in 1991 at the beginning of the Gulf. Well, actually, I believe it was at the end of the Gulf War. The Army National Guard in 1997, and as a training aid in 2005. So you will not find an M60 in actual service in any unit that plans on using them in combat. The only ones that are left apparently are drone versions of the M60 that they use for target practice. So and that's also funny that we would spend money to turn these things into large RC cars and then drive them around for people to shoot at, but apparently we do that. But that's the only way it's still in service here with the United States military, is as a drone target. We will not use these things as frontline tanks anymore. They're obsolete, and that's something that the Russians just simply don't understand. They're doing so badly, these are obsolete. And what's the funniest thing is that I gotta show y'all this. How many tanks does Russia have? And when you pull that up, it says, according to The Guardian, that's estimated around 5,000. But the answer before the war, like from here, from the Kyiv Post, this would have been the normal answer you saw. They have 12,000 tanks. How many of those really work? Not that many. And that's the funniest thing about it. We think that it's around 5,000. That's kind of like the ballpark number right now that everyone's going with, is that it is somewhere, give or take, around 5,000 operational tanks. And that's probably including the T-62Ms that are being refitted for service, as well as these T-54s that are now being drawn out as well. It's probably around 5,000 of them. The other, the other 7,000 of them, they're just not usable. They're rotting away, and while they're on paper, they'll never be usable anymore. They're just completely worn down. And then the United States, how many tanks does the U.S. have? And these numbers only count the operational main battle tanks. We have 6,612 main battle tanks. And as I understand it, since this is a 2022 number, this probably includes the Marine Corps' M1A1 Abrams in the number, but all 6,612 of these tanks are actually usable in a frontline unit. So in practical numbers of usable tanks, we do outnumber Russian armor massively, and not only that, we outgun them in every way. The firepower, the maneuverability, the armor, and everything else in between. So it's it's just crazy. It's the craziest thing I've ever heard, that the second best military in the world is now going to using almost World War II era tanks because they've run out of everything else. So with that, we're now going to be moving on from that little bit of news, and we're now going to be moving on up into the Kursk area because we heard some explosions at the Kursk airfield today. We don't really know what caused these or what kind of damage has been caused at the Kursk airfield, but we did hear the explosions. You can hear one right there. When you see the car alarms going off, it's a fun time in Kursk. We can actually see this guy who I didn't see until now getting out of his car, taking a look around, because that will certainly fix the situation. Blitz, what's going on?
Is this a Russian on vacation?
Maybe. I mean, I guess the vacation is walking from his apartment and sitting in his car for a little bit. Like, that's like a work vacation in Russia. But and something blew up at the Kursk airfield. We still don't have a lot of information as to what it was. It appears that this is the only video we've been able to find so far. So we'll be waiting to see if we do get more news and more information about what happened there. But right now, all we know is that something has exploded at the Kursk airfield. We're now going to be moving on from that little bit of news inside of Russia and on into our next bit inside of Moscow, where we actually saw that while the Russians are pulling out T-54s because they've run out of tanks, they're awarding the pilot who ran into, or really crashed into, the Predator drone over the Black Sea. They're giving him a medal. And who else could do this great task but our boy, the bricklayer? So here's the video. And this is the pilot? Holy
Mr. Lunchtime
moly.
Sun.
Dude, this guy, it doesn't even need a G suit, man. That's like, he has a built-in G suit in there somewhere, man.
That's brutal.
Jeez. So now they're giving him the medal. And also, our little boy Sergey here, he might be expecting a baby sometime in the next few months. I mean, someone needs to check that out. I think it's going to be called Baby Beer or something like that, but he's not looking that well either.
Находились на боевом дежурстве по ПВО 14 марта и поступила.
And this guy, Mandy, this guy's got medals out the kazoo. I mean, like, I think, look, oh my God, they're Nazis. An Iron Cross. Oh my God. But you know something, Matthew?
What does that say? What does that say though about your pilots if you're giving out awards for that pitiful flying when you crash into a drone? It's like that's the best they've got.
But I do have to say something, Matthew. I do have to give a huge shout out to this man's uniform, because those buttons holding that uniform together have to be stronger than the Fighting 93rd, because there's no way in hell that these things have a normal sewing like pattern to them and they're holding up that much. I mean, like, these things look like they're about to pop off, and I've seen buttons pop off in even less stress than this. I mean, oh my God.
Со вторым экипажем, двумя экипажами. Определили, что это беспилотный летающий аппарат Reaper MQ-9. Ну, передали.
I don't even know what he's saying, unfortunately, but I'm just going to let y'all marvel at what they call a ace pilot in Russia.
Которыми пытались его заставить прекратить выполнение своего задания.
He seems a little shocked himself about the whole situation.
A little bit, yeah. I wouldn't lie. He does kind of seem a little shocked about it, but yeah, that's the end of that clip, and that's what happens when you screw up in Russia. When you ram into the drone that you're supposed to be crashing while causing no damage to yourself, you end up getting a medal for doing the complete opposite. Nice job. And also, this pilot, he may need to go on a restrictive diet or something similar, because before long, the ground crews are going, we can't load all the missiles onto the plane because if we do, it's going to be overweight, man. Like, hell, man. Like, you know, I wonder how much trim they have to do on the elevators at the back of the plane to keep that thing in flight, because you know he makes that thing front heavy.
Yeah, probably so.
Man, I mean, like, when he gets in that thing, that front landing gear looks like that JetBlue aircraft that had that incident back in the late 2000s. Like, that thing's just skinning down the runway, sparks flying up and everything. It's terrible, I'm telling you. So with that,
I got some roast, but I'll reserve the roast. I don't want to get too brutal. But
so with that, we're now going to be moving deep into Russia, somewhere in the area of the Ural Mountains, pretty much everywhere. But we got one video clip showing us that the partisan attacks are still going on the, I guess you could say, signal boxes of the Russian railways.
как отблеск от заката.
Now we got to mute that, but we can see him looking around and enjoying the warm fire of a signal box burning to the ground. These signal boxes, of course, are very important to the Russian railway infrastructure, and if burned and destroyed, can lead to an entire area being down until this is repaired. Signaling is very important in the railroad industry. Something that sometimes companies in the United States like Norfolk Southern and CSX just simply don't understand either. But still, great to see that the partisans are doing a great job over there, and hopefully they can keep up that kind of damage, because while it seems insignificant just watching a little electrical substation box burning, it actually has a lot of impact on the railroad infrastructure. We're now going to be moving on into the United Kingdom, because of course yesterday we covered the news that they were going to be giving the Ukrainians depleted uranium munitions, and we actually got a little informational pamphlet today about the depleted uranium munitions. So, I'm going to read this off to you. Depleted uranium tank shells. The UK will provide Ukraine with depleted uranium shells. This metal increases the armor-piercing ability of shells and the protective properties of the armor. The British are not giving the Ukrainians depleted uranium armor. They're only giving them depleted uranium shells. Because I have never heard anything about them getting armor, and that armor is actually very expensive and very rare. In fact, some M1 Abrams have a different kind of composite armor inside of their turrets, because depleted uranium was actually, well, we could afford it, but we couldn't get enough of it, because there's not enough out there. So, anyways, this explains what happens when the shell's fired. After the projectile exits the barrel, its shell falls off, and the depleted uranium core penetrates the target with devastating force. When passing through the armor, the Ukrainian core is self-sharpening. Depleted uranium is also used to strengthen tank armor, which is not being used for in Ukraine, at least from what we know, but it could be in the future. The United Nations Scientific Committee on the Effects of Atomic Radiation found no clinical pathologies associated with depleted uranium. And that's a very important fact right there, because rather than breathing in the dust, which I think if you're breathing in the dust of your composite armor, whether it be from a depleted uranium shell or not, you're probably going to get all kinds of cancer anyways. Then you're messed up a little bit. You'll probably get cancer at some point. But at the same time, it's a shell. You know, it's like, it's going to pretty much kill them from overpressure anyway. So what does it really matter if they're breathing in if they're breathing in some kind of small amounts of dust while they're already getting killed? You know, it's like that seems a little redundant to me. But still.
Well, what about the dust from a normal round? Isn't that also dangerous? It has lead in it, doesn't it?
Yeah, I would assume so. Let's see. What is an APFSDS shell made of? And let's find that out. Tungsten and depleted uranium. So either tungsten and depleted uranium, or tungsten and depleted uranium, I would assume. Let's see. So yeah, it's tungsten. That's what a normal one's made out of. I would assume that tungsten isn't really good to inhale in dust form. In fact, I would take a very broad assumption and assume that it's really not good to breathe in any kind of metallic objects in dust form, like steel. You know, I feel like that'll also have some bad health effects if you breathed in dusted steel. You know, like that sounds like it would just be damaging. So. And so I don't know why they're going to be like, oh, depleted uranium, if you breathe in the dust, it's going to be bad for you. It's like, wait, as opposed to what? Breathing in, like, what? Like gold? Dusted gold? Like, it's all going to be bad for you. But anyways, that's what a normal APFSDS shell is made of. And they're making this one sound a little, I would have to say, this is a little bit misinforming, because if you don't know about an APFSDS shell, you'll probably be like, oh, this is special, how the shell leaves, the barrel of the tank. It's not really that special, because what I put in right here, called an APFSDS shell, is an armor-piercing, fin-stabilized discarding sabot. This is your go-to modern anti-tank round used by any tank. You can actually see a picture of one right there, and I'll try and get you another picture right here. So, I'm not really sure if this one is made of depleted uranium or tungsten, but they all operate in the same way. It's just a giant dart, as you can see right here. It's a giant dart that sits in a tank shell. They load it in, and the shell, once fired, pretty much just serves the purpose of keeping that dart going down the barrel and getting some spin, because that dart is so narrow, it can't really take up the entire width of the barrel. So it needs a little bit of help with that. And as soon as it leaves the barrel, the parts that kept it in the barrel and got it its spin, they fall off. They go flying away, like you can see in this picture here, or in this one right here. The dart then flies at incredible speed, with a lot of velocity behind it, straight into whatever it's going to hit, and it will almost, well, actually, it won't almost always go through. It will nearly go through, though. On most modern armor, it still will blast almost clean through it, because there's just so much velocity behind such a, I guess you could say, pinpoint area that there's really no way it can't punch through most things. But there are some differences, however. Like, for example, I'll show y'all this to let y'all get an idea that there is a way to defeat depleted uranium and also APF-SDS shells as a whole. The Leopard 2A5 is a modernization of the Leopard 2A4 from the German army, and you'll see that this thing has this very weird looking kind of like wedge-shaped front of the turret. The reason why it has that is because this is an armor. This is actually steel, because under that, it still looks like a Leopard 2A4 right here, which I'll show y'all. So Leopard 2A5 right here with this frontal armor looks just like this underneath. That little wedge-shaped front is actually just a shell, and that shell's entire purpose is to make an APF-SDS shell, if it hits it, vibrate hard enough that when it actually does hit the armor of the Leopard underneath that, it shatters on impact and can't go through. So, you know, there is a way to defeat an APF-SDS shell, but we don't see any of that on any Russian tanks. It'll pretty much blast clean through them, even if they have explosive, reactive, and composite armor. So that is very good to know that they will be getting those depleted uranium shells, and also good to know that the Russians are just whining like kids again, because there's really no health effects from depleted uranium. It's just a very dense metal. With that, we're now going to be moving...
after seeing those museum tanks come out, that could be why Russia's so worried, because they see these DU rounds heading over to Ukraine. Those are overkill for the, you know, quote-unquote nicer tanks they have. For the older ones, it's going to absolutely demolish them.
Yeah, I mean, like, certainly. And also, another thing that I have to say is that the T-90Ms, like, this is a very good point, T-90Ms have already been proven to be destroyed by really anything Ukraine has. Stugnas, Javelins, anything you could think of, these things have been killed by about all of them at this point. So an APF-SDS shell obviously will have no problem going through anything on it. And that's the best tank Russia has, and they only have about 15 of them left. They're most likely going to be going up against T-62s, like this one right here in this picture. They'll most likely be going up against these, or they'll most likely be going up against the T-54. And most of the ones we saw going to Ukraine, well, they look exactly like that one. You know, and that one's actually an Iraqi one at some Canadian museum. And they're using these. We're driving them around in museums, man. And everyone's going, wow, that's such a cool old tank. Meanwhile, in the Russian army, this is your battle tank. Use it, please. It's like, oh, God. It's like we're losing. We're losing badly. But anyways, we're now going to be moving on from that news and on into Germany, where we also saw some training going on with the Germans. And it looked like some pretty interesting stuff. Of course, it's a training field in Germany. Training is being conducted by the United States. And here's the clip. You see him looking around, dust all in the air. This is a very sandy training ground. We see them messing with their Humvees, and now we can see a Max Pro up there and another Max Pro. And we now see some M113s passing by and some Bradleys as well. Man, those Bradleys
looks like Afghanistan or something.
It kind of does, but the NATO tricolor tells us that it is somewhere in a woodland area like Germany, although this training ground almost looks like the desert. So I don't know what training ground this is. It's a weird looking one for sure, but it is great to know that they are training the Ukrainians right now on using all kinds of armored personnel carriers, not just the Bradleys, but also the M113s, the Max Pros, and everything else in between. It's always great to see, and we love to hear it. With that, we're now going to be moving on from that bit of news and on into Ukraine, where we saw inside of the Kyiv area today, Zelensky talked about peace negotiations with the Russians, and here was his input on that. And so, real quick, put this up, and here we go.
Происходит, что пока о переговорах и речи быть не может.
Also, I'll back this up and actually read off the subtitles because unless if it's Zelensky's speech, we do that on everything. So here we go. With everything that's happening, there cannot even be any kind of talk about negotiations. The narrative which Russia tries to promote, and you are a witness to that, is that Ukraine is not interested in peace, which, to put it mildly, sounds ridiculous. I want to bring you down to earth, and I don't even mean figuratively, but literally on our territory. The war is happening entirely on our territory. They came to us, and they kill our own citizens. Russia, with their daily attacks, offensives, or following retreats, is accompanying all of this with brutal murder and rape. Russia is showing us that they don't see any other type of negotiation than that one. And we explain that everything they have done here proves that they are not even thinking of any kind of dialogue, and they never have. They simply made the decision to occupy our country. This is like in 2014, when they have made that decision and the world hasn't given them a proper punch in the face. So they went further and further and further, but we punched them in the face. And so that's Zelensky's comment on, should you have peace talks with the Russians? He's like, no. It's like, we're going to push them out. So with that, we're moving on to our next clip in Kyiv, where we saw a Shahed attack occur last night. This was a little unfortunate, as while most of the Shaheds were shot down, 16 of them, some of them did make their ways to residential buildings, ending up killing 3 Ukrainian citizens, and injuring an additional 7. We could see one of the buildings here that was damaged. It appears that the Shahed hit the very top of the building, but we can see that the explosive force was very large, as it was able to take out multiple apartments across the top of the building. We can see first responders up there in the rubble trying to find survivors, and we can see the fire trucks that have been brought to the area to help out the first responders getting to the top of that building. And it's a sad sight to see, one that has become somewhat expected and normal at this point, but it's sickening to think that such a sight like this is almost expected and almost normal at this point. And hopefully one day the Russians that are conducting these attacks, the guys that sit there and fly these Shaheds straight into these buildings, eventually get held accountable, either in a court, an international court, or somewhere on the battlefield, or maybe even a little drone flying back towards them. With that, we're now going to be moving on south of the city of Kyiv, where we also saw Ukrainians playing laser tag, but a laser tag that has a lot more implication than the normal kind. This laser tag is being used for training. We can see them getting ready, putting on their gear. We see them wearing the little laser tag ID things.
This looks like it'd probably be pretty fun if it wasn't a war.
And we actually see some of them wearing red armbands to simulate Russian forces. We now see them grabbing their AKs. You can see the little laser, I guess you could say shooter on the front of it. Or the laser gun, I guess is the best way to say it. Oh, wait a minute, hang on. We gotta pause it because it looks like OBS has just crapped itself. Yep, it did. Can you hear me, man?
Yeah, we had some lag just for a moment.
Well, it looks like right now. Oh, wait a minute, yeah, it looks like we're back to normal. So with that, oh, wait a minute, nope, we are not. It looks like it's still going on here, so we're gonna give it a second. And I'm also gonna throw in lag alert in the chat. Lag alert. And it looks like we're still waiting it out. I don't know what hit the internet this time.
It's probably our good old buddies over there at the ISP.
Yeah, probably.
Hey, like Alexander Nev said, did Alec Baldwin check those weapons first? Yeah, are these the Alec Baldwin blanks or the actual blanks?
Good question. And we're gonna let this continue on because it seems like a lot of people are saying that we're good actually.
Our viewership just shot up to like 7,000 in like 30 seconds.
Don't worry, it's just a spike. It'll stable. It will, I promise. So with that, we're going to get back to this video. Today we practice storming a building.
Штурм будівлі з підходом до
Approaching the building from a wood line
лісопосадки і
and clearing the building.
захист будівлі. Використовували ми
Today we use laser tag.
сьогодні лазер-так. Система з лазерними датчиками, які знаходяться на жилетах, на чохлі каски. Саме лазерна знаходиться на автоматах. І при час пострілу проводиться контакт з датчиками на жилеті або на чохлі каски.
When firing, contact... Oh, wait a minute. I'm sorry. I thought that was a new one. Oh, he did. On the soldier's arm is a device that upon being hit by the enemy laser,
під час враження попадання лазера на датчик,
the sensor gives an electric impulse and electric discharge occurs.
All your hits, man.
A group of 5 people at 12 o'clock. You now see one of them advancing the fake Russian. The exercise is very important due to its close relation in real conditions.
Люди, тут вчаться
With laser tag, soldiers can learn how to
боях, з того, що як штурмувати
correctly assault, how to cover, and how not to get wounded.
поранення.
With exercises that are happening here, thanks to our command who helped us set it up, people are gaining combat skills. It is better to get hit with an electric charge on your arm rather than a bullet. This makes them understand if they went to the wrong place, they discuss with each other who did what wrong. And a very interesting little training regimen there, using something as simple as laser tag, which some people go out and enjoy as a hobby, to actually train soldiers to get ready for war. And it seems as though it's doing fairly well. And this is actually a fairly common used tactic, I guess you could say, in a lot of Western militaries. The United States has used laser tag in training. The British have used laser tag in training. A lot of countries in the Western world use laser tag for training because it's one of the easiest and kind of most, I guess you could say, applicable ways to train. Yeah, realistic, applicable, either one. I guess that works. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on from that interesting little clip showing us the Ukrainians training new soldiers for the front. And with that, we're now moving on into our location unknowns. We actually didn't have that many of them today, one of the smallest numbers ever, which is only 3. And so starting off with our first bit of location unknown news, we saw a compilation of footage from the war. I'm assuming it's recent because some of these videos I haven't seen before. Some of them may not be, so we're going to go through them and see. Nonetheless, it was an interesting compilation. So let's wait for it to load, and let's mute it. And there we go. Tank on the move, tank get hit. Tank on advance. Ukrainians fire on Russians in trench. And the video all laggy. I bet you our internet is absolutely going poo-poo. Let me check. Oh, wrong one.
I can still hear you fine over on my end.
Well, you can hear me fine, but video not load good, bleed. We will run video again. They fired down trench. Grenade explodes near them. We now see them grabbing the prisoners.
Dude, jeez.
We can now see them assaulting a trench. We've seen some of these clips before. Haven't seen that one, though. We have seen this one.
Smoke coming out of that turret like a truck smokestack.
Right there, we get barbecue. Right here, we see a firefight in the woods during winter. We're now firing into the distance. We now see another tank blowing up. That one blew up pretty quickly.
Are you telling me that the Russian soldiers climbed down in that little, like, narrow hole?
They did, and they lit it up with lead. We've seen that video, of course. And with that, that's the end of this clip. But once again, very interesting to see, and a very interesting little montage. And Paula McDonald said, hello, and, hello. Looks like we're still connected good. With that, we're moving on to the next one where we saw some Ukrainian soldiers kidding around. Just having a fun time. I don't know what the song is, and now the video's having
Few
a
moments
И
later.
тут началась наша служба в армии.
Oh, we gotta mute that. But I like this guy, Matthew. He's just there out in the street in the little baby stroller, and he goes, and the Russians go, oh, bled, let's go out there and harass the mom pushing the stroller. And they come out in the street, he's got a whole squad of guys, and they just mow him down. All right, very nice tactic.
He's really mature. Please excuse his actions.
You know,
he doesn't mean to shoot.
You know, someone here, a keyboard warrior, is about to yell out, hey, Ukrainian soldier risking your life every day. Stop acting like a 12-year-old. You know, there's a war going on. You know, it sounded like that. But still.
When he shoots somebody, they're like, oh, excuse me, comrade. He's just a little boy.
Hey, give him a pacifier or something so that way he can sit there and really get into it. But anyways, absolutely incredible to see. Love to see it. It's always good to see that they have a sense of humor and the morale is high enough that they'll still joke around. And so with that, we're now about to be moving on because someone's about to come out of the woodwork and tell this guy to stop acting so immature. I know it. And they're also going to tell me to stop acting immature too. And to that, Matthew, I've just got to say, oh man, I get no respect around here. Anyways,
oh, man.
that's all I could do. If I do any more, people will go AWOL. So with that, we're moving on to our last bit of Location Unknown news, where we saw the Russian losses for today, and they were incredibly high.
Ooh.
920 Russian soldiers killed over the past 24 hours. An incredibly high number. A very high number. I can't even state enough how high this number really is. It is high, to say the least. Higher than Snoop Dogg. We can also see that 8 armored personnel carriers have been destroyed over the past 24 hours. Once again, a decent number, but not as high as the infantry one. The infantry one is getting fairly high. 6 supply trucks were destroyed. That is average for the most of the month. 5 tanks destroyed. That's actually a little above average, although we've been getting some fairly high days over this past week. 3 artillery pieces have been destroyed. Very nice to see. That's about an entire artillery battery destroyed over 24 hours. The 16 Shaheds were shot down and were already included in the casualty report. 2 MLRSs were lost. We don't know how, but still, very nice to see that they were lost. We also saw that 2 cruise missiles were destroyed, 2 anti-aircraft systems were also blown away, and 4 Bobcat skid steers.
4 Bobcats, baby!
Yeah! And look at the comments over here. Look at this. 4 Bobcats, Enforcer Matt might have a stroke. This was actually put up by the Enforcer. Man.
The funny thing is I wrote that about myself in the third person.
You're like a certain person calling up a bank. I hear that he's a really nice guy. You know, like and also Matt.
Call me John Barrett.
Matt right here threw up a comment of his own for us, but that's not you. That's another Matt. We also saw another Bobcat skid steer from Krzysztof P, I believe. Pretty nice. Me. That's not me. ABC. That's not me. But let's see here. Man, people are going wild over here commenting on. Oh my god.
Oh my god. What is that?
Oh my god. That's scary.
Get it off the screen. Get it off.
Boo! Get it off the stage. That is a body double for sure, right there. You know that's a body double somewhere deep in Siberia where they really couldn't get a good one, so they just got this guy. This poor guy. I'm just kidding. It's a Photoshop. But anyways, 4 knockoff
Dang,
Bobcats.
every comment down here is about the Bobcats. Jeez.
Mark P, he threw in one too. Christian threw in one. Ron Anderson threw in one. He said, would you just look at it? Oh my god, Christian threw in one. Trash Panda threw in one. KJ, dude, I swear, Kiev Independent soon is going to be like, what the hell is going on here? Literally every single comment on this thing is Bobcat skid steers.
They're going to send us a
Uh-oh, you just cut out right
message
there.
Soon to say,
oh, you're cutting out bad. You're cutting out terribly, Matthew. Oh, terribly. Oh, my lord.
Oh, I get no respect.
I'm telling you, I get no respect around here. I get no respect. Oh, man, I'm telling you, it's bad. It's tough. Tough, real tough. My internet won't support me. And that's because we looked at this ungodly abomination. That thing cut out the internet. I'm betting money on it. This thing, dude, that thing does not need to exist.
Grew land.
Oh, we can't even hear him right now. Man, he's gone.
This is
All
gone?
right. All
Me?
right, I'm going to say this again because it worked the last time. Someone's messing with us right now. You better stop because we got one person lined up, and we're going to be going to war with them in minutes if the internet situation doesn't improve. So with that, we're now going to be moving on from the casualty report from the Kyiv Independent. Very nice to see. Also great to see that everyone in the Leaf Spring Army is down there about the Bobcats. And with that, we're now going to be moving on into the actual frontline news, starting off in the Northeast and then moving our way down into Zaporizhia. But before we get to that, we have some polls that we have to cover, and I want to know what y'all are saying on them, and hopefully y'all have a lot of input. It looks like we've got nearly 1,700 votes on this last poll, and I want to hear what y'all are thinking. And so, what do we got, Matthew?
All right.
Oh, he's cutting out.
Can you hear
badly.
me?
No, I can hardly hear you. In fact, I really can't hear you.
Oh man. Let's see here. Let me try disconnecting.
M288 says your show is degrading. I think we kind of know that. I think we know that at this point. So let's see if Matthew disconnecting and reconnecting fixes the problem. So we're gonna wait for Matthew to come back, and while we wait for him to come back, how are y'all all doing?
Clearly, but I can't. But you can't hear me clearly.
Oh, I can hear you now. Talk a little bit.
Hello, can you hear me? This is Enforcer Matt. I like Bobcats. It's good when they get blown up.
Okay.
I like the fake ones too.
Make sure to respond as fast as possible once I end talking, and that's going to happen right now.
Yeah.
Okay, that seemed like it may have been a little laggy because it took you a few seconds, but I think we're okay now, hopefully. If not...
You just want me to go and read through the first poll and see what happens?
Yeah, you're still cutting up. But I gotta tell you, I'm so sorry, everyone, because I saw someone say your show is degrading, and I thank you for pointing that out. I think we do understand that, and yeah, the internet's not really doing well. Down there at the bottom of my screen, it shows that our internet connection is poor. I would get on it and look at it, but if I did, it would give away a lot of information about us, so can't really do that. But yeah, the internet quality is not great right now. I'll be honest with y'all. I don't know what the Discord call quality is like. It actually is not
Can you
that
hear me now?
bad. I can hear you. And we lost him again. Oh boy, y'all don't know how much this aggravates me.
And Ukraine counteroffensive.
And he's cutting out again.
Yeah, and the funny part is I'm not even talking right now.
Really?
Yeah, you're hearing me like 10 seconds behind.
Oh well, that's fun to know. You know, I'm trying to. Oh wow, look.
I think the whole thing went out.
Yeah, the stream just went out. But on my
They were getting screwed with by somebody.
You know, let me check something real quick. Let me check something on YouTube's end. Because right now OBS says we're fine. YouTube's not saying we're fine. Let's see here. All right. It looks like we might be back. The chat's going wild. Can you hear me, Matthew?
Yeah, I can hear you.
I be dipped. This is annoying as hell. I gotta be honest with y'all. This is exhausting for us. We're sorry to everyone who's having to deal with this with us. We don't know what's going on with the internet right now, and we don't know what's going on with YouTube. Dennis says
Denny's
been
weighed
hacked.
in. He said we've been hacked.
We've been hacked. What?
Tell us who, Denny's. Tell us.
Well,
do you have experience with this problem?
Real quick, Dennis. Have you peeped our Twitter? Have you peeped our Twitter, Mr. Davidov? Because it is a nice one, I must say. We've gotten 4,032 followers, and look, it's not even loading either. I be tipped, man. This just pisses me off. And now Dennis is here, so it even adds more intrigue to the. It's like everyone's about to pop in. The president of the United States about to come in. Look, man, it's hacking. It's like, oh god, it's like everything's falling apart. But anyways, make sure to peep the Twitter while we sit here and wait for this to come back. I'm doing this right now to see if we even catch up. So it actually looks like we are catching up. Can you hear me, Matthew, talk as soon as I stop talking? And that's going to be right now.
Hello, hello.
It seems like we may have called up here for like the next 30 seconds. So now let's get into the polls while we are absolutely hemorrhaging viewers.
offensive is Can you hear me at all?
No, I
So
can't.
I'm dead silent.
Yeah, I can't hear you at all. You know, real quick, I'm actually going to check some, so I'll be right back. Okay, so my computer is fine. If you can
Man,
still
this
hear me,
lag
Matthew. I'm actually going to have to say this because this is so bad. We're going to have to end this stream and we're going to have to turn on a new one. We're going to make a new one because this is terrible. So with that, if anyone can still hear me, y'all might be able to, y'all might not be able to. We are going to be rounding out this stream, but we will be trying to bring this thing back online. So hang tight, and we'll see you all in just a few seconds. Make sure to hop over to the new stream.
За нашу свободу.